Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I've got a fever. Lymph nodes are all kind of swollen. I'm concerned I'm coming down with a case of NIT madness, Tony. Third round of the NIT coming up tonight at the Schottenstein Center, Ohio State and Georgia. I'm assured that that's what we're going to be talking about on this entire show. Am I right? I haven't looked at the rundown. Am I right?
Well, I know you haven't looked at the rundown, Tom. That's standard operating procedure. But we will talk about it right now. Tickets are still available, so go grab your tickets. I will say, whenever the last NIT game was, the crowd was pretty good. That would have been, Saturday night. The crowd was good because it's just lower bowl tickets being sold, lower bowl seats. So you can get pretty good seats for like $31 and cheer on the Buckeyes as they head to, they tried to get to the Hinkle Fieldhouse, which I think is a much better place for the NIT than Madison Square Garden. The Final Four of the NIT and, of course, the championship game. There in Indianapolis at the gym. I wanted to go visit this place once, and I also wanted to go visit the Hoosiers movie Hall of Fame, that gym there. And you're like, no, Tony, we don't want to do that. And I tweeted about it, and the Hall of Fame was like, gosh, Tom, you are such a jerk. And so that's how I remember it.
You might be confusing us and one of our former traveling partners there, who, yes, I am always, as is, I think, well known on this show, always the one who on road trips is like, oh, let's go see the world's fourth largest ball of twine just 4 short hours away. You, of course, are the one who always is like, you know what I hate? Fun. Never, not even once. And so, yeah, it's, I would love to go. I think I'm not around that weekend. I think I looked at that. Isn't that the weekend of the 4th through 6th or something? The NIT there's Final Four.
Yeah, there is stuff going on. Also, congratulations to the women's hockey team, national championship win over Wisconsin, exacting revenge on the loss last year. So what's that? 2 out of 3 years now for the Buckeyes there. Tom, moving to Ohio State football. I'm sorry we've got to talk about this, but news breaking, if you can call it that. On Monday, the Ohio State spring game, April 13th, will be airing on Fox National, not Fox Sports Ohio, which no longer exists, not Fox Sports Midwest, which doesn't exist, but the actual broadcast Fox channel. First time that it's been, I think first time a spring game has been broadcast, other than, I know ESPN has done some Alabama and some Georgia and things like that, but you don't need cable for this, which I think is pretty crazy.
Well, it's funny. You look back 20 years or so, give or take, and you used to be able to get into the Ohio State spring game with the one can of food. Like, here's some creamed corn, 3 hours of football, please. And back then, it was televised on Channel 10, locally, WBNS, and it was like, what a time to be alive. The Ohio State spring game is being televised now, live. This is crazy. You can't just walk in the stadium. You have to bring this can of corn to get in. It is, and here we are 20 years later, not just cable, not just like, oh, Big Ten Network is doing it. Fox, National, Tony, the home of the Tracy Ullman Show.
Wow.
Now the home of the Ohio State spring game. I get the sense that college football is becoming a bigger business. I think this is really interesting, though, from the standpoint that I think Fox is like clearly trying to really plant their flag here. Like, ESPN has televised spring games, and it's like, well, yeah, that's ESPN. It's not, Fox is different. Fox is a whole broadcast network. They don't just televise sports. This is one of these things that, like, it's kind of crazy, but also it feels like a little bit of a statement of purpose where they're kind of like planting their flag here. Like, this is obviously college football has become much bigger business for them over the last decade or so, but this feels like, all right, they are really like planting their flag here that yes, this is our thing. We are really going to go all in on college football.
Yeah, a statement of purpose, a statement of partnership. So Tracy Ullman, Al Bundy, Jack Bauer, Ryan Day. Basically, the Mount Rushmore of Fox. The Michigan game, the Michigan spring game, will be broadcast a week later live as well. So going all in on that one as well. And I had somebody ask me, will Ohio State do anything differently for the spring game? Because it is a national broadcast. And I'm not expecting anything entirely different. Now, last year, they started out with no tackling, but that only lasted for like a series or two until the starters got out. And then they did go towards 2 hitting. So I would think something like that. I'm not expecting anything outrageously different. They may do some fun little things here and there for the broadcast, but I think it's still going to be the spring game, which is exciting to think about. But by the third quarter, you're like, man, I could get the rest of my day started. Get back home. It's nice out, hit the grill, something like that. You're not necessarily thinking about, boy, I can't wait to see who starts the fourth quarter, even though there are a ton of things to be interested about with this team. So I do wonder what they try to do. I'm sure there's always a ton of interviews on Big Ten Network and on Channel 10. Although I do remember, Tom, one year, Channel 10 with that food drive, it may have been like 2002 or so, 2003. They did as much broadcasting the food drive as they did the game. Not happy. I was not happy about that. Like, you're wanting to see stuff happen, and he was like, let's go outside 28th Avenue where we've got 3 cans of green beans just came in. Let's talk about those. Not cool. I don't expect that for this Fox broadcast. Although, if it is, I will come back and eat my crow.
Fox is all in on canned goods this year. It's big move corporate wide. It's crazy. As someone who worked in a TV station back then, I can tell you that calls for stuff like that, but not just, hey, I'm missing the spring game because of canned goods, but stuff like, hey, I'm missing, I don't know, Friends because of there's a tornado warning. People will call and be very angry. Well, the tornado's not at my house. Why do you have to have it on? And it's like, well, first of all, it's the law. Second of all, perspective. Third of all, watch it on reruns in 20 years. It'll be fine. Anyway, yeah, I think the big difference you're going to see on the spring game is, hey, there's probably going to be a lot more commercials. And I'm just picturing the guy with the red hat coming out on the field and with the little pole that says 3 minutes and 30 seconds and everyone just losing the will to live sometime around the middle of the third quarter. I think that's going to be the difference at the Ohio State spring game. I'm interested in how this impacts the Michigan spring game because the spring game has just never been a thing at Michigan the way it has at Ohio State for decades now. I mean, Ohio State was getting 50,000 people in the mid-90s for spring games, and Michigan still doesn't treat it like an actual game. And I'm wondering if Fox coming up there, they're probably, Fox is as aware of this as I am, I'm sure, if not more. So I'm guessing Fox is probably going to say that, hey, listen, I know this is always kind of like a vaguely structured play date for your team, and that's about it. I'm guessing that Fox is probably saying it needs to be a little more football-y if we're going to put this on national TV. And with this not being a Jim Harbaugh team, Sherrone Moore may be a little more willing to play ball there with that. So I would guess structurally it may have a bigger impact on the Michigan spring game than the Ohio State spring game. But yeah, get ready to sit around and maybe we get some spring game knocker ball out of this, Tony. And if that's the case, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's a win. That is honestly what you should broadcast for the entire fourth quarter. Just knocker ball. And again, I'm going to suggest this. I'll continue to suggest it. Start the balls at the top of south stands and then push them onto the field. I think that would be perfect. And regarding the Michigan, like, who is not excited to watch Jack Tuttle and Alex Orji battle it out, basically, at quarterback there as they look to take over for J.J. McCarthy, who is apparently going to be drafted in the top 4 of the NFL draft, which good on you for that. Congratulations to everybody involved there. So that's the spring game. Tom, let's talk about something that happened this past Saturday. Ohio State practice. We were not there. You and Kevin have talked about it on the Monday morning, Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning episode about some of the stuff that we're hearing. We've got a ton of information and intel over on the Buckeye Huddle message board. You can read it all there. The paywall, you've got to join, become a member, and you can read about all of that. And I want to start with the guy that everybody is talking about, and that is Jeremiah Smith. Because I have tried to be, Tom, the lone voice of reason. Everybody else is going crazy, Tom, even you. I am trying to be the lone voice of reason on this guy because he's just a freshman. We know the history of true freshman wide receivers. We've talked about it so many times on this show. I'm trying to tell people to remain calm and don't be expecting anything crazy. Now, based on what I'm hearing, what you're hearing, what we're all hearing, that is meshing, nothing is contradictory when it comes to Jeremiah Smith. I would like to tell the old me, dude, shut up. You're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Get over yourself. This guy is different. This is not a typical freshman wide receiver. Nothing about him to this point has been typical. Nothing as a high schooler was typical. And so I'm just wondering, have your opinions changed? Mine have changed. Not that I didn't think he would eventually be great or anything like that, but my expectations for him as a true freshman have changed greatly just based on these first 6 practices or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think my philosophy with true freshmen is always you're better off being a little bit behind on the hype and the build up and the expectations, because number one, this is someone who's 18 years old and living away from home for the first time. And, there's a lot that you're changing and your life is changing and you're in different spots surrounded by different people. And, there's always an adjustment period. So based on history, it's just not realistic to expect a guy to start day one as a wide receiver. It's not realistic to expect this guy to have 800 yards and 10 touchdowns as a freshman or whatever. It just is, as much as people are always getting hyped up in the spring and everyone's excited and everyone's so amazed by what this guy can do. Yeah, it's great. Okay. All that aside, this feels different. Like, this is one of these things where we've talked on the show before about one of the benefits of having done this year after year after year is you pick up the patterns, and it's like, there's a certain way they talk about guys if this is a guy who's just not going to play at all this year. And there's a certain way they talk about guys where it's like, yeah, this guy is going to be good, but not yet. He's just not ready. And it's like a see you in a year kind of thing. There's a certain way they talk about guys who might have a chance to be contributors. Those are generally the way they talk about freshmen. This is none of those things. The conversations that you're having with everyone, not just like, oh, this one guy said this guy is different. This is everyone. This is, you look back at the national recruiting guys when Jeremiah Smith was a high school guy, they're all saying the same thing. You listen to guy talking on the record. We talk all about Denzel Burke, and Denzel Burke is, sort of our barometer of truth of this on this year's team. He's saying the same stuff. You talk to people all, behind the scenes, off the record, on background, they're all saying the same thing. And the same thing is, I mean, what was the word? You posted one word on our board and it was, incredible or amazing or something like that. What was the word that you were given?
Well, a few, and I think the first one was unbelievable. Later on, I was told I believe it was breathtaking. Which, Tom, when was the last time you heard that about a particular football player like Barry Sanders? I mean, it's not something that you normally throw out there.
Right. I think the last time I heard someone describe like that, it was an episode of Seinfeld, and it was them describing a baby. This is probably not the same context as that, but it just, when you start to hear it and you're hearing stuff that you don't normally hear and you're hearing it from everyone, it's like, okay, we have our normal, like the Overton window of, respectable ways to discuss what, expectations for a freshman. The window keeps shifting a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more. And, you go back 2-3 weeks and I'm saying, listen, I don't think it's realistic to expect someone to start as a freshman. I think if you get out there middle of the season, you start making impact. That's sort of the expectation for like the far right tail outcome for a true freshman wide receiver is best possible scenario, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, whoever. Like, these are huge, huge names, guys who ended up getting picked in the first round of the NFL draft. And it was like, well, maybe by October they'll be ready to do something, and then you see them by the end of the year. It's like, oh boy. I think we're now past that, and now I'm thinking, okay, I am ready to start having the at least contributing very beginning of the season, maybe starting beginning of the season. I know you pulled up the stat. David Boston, 6 starts as a freshman. I think I'm at the point where I'm now expecting maybe more than that. And I don't know if that's starting every single game this year, but I mean, I think we maybe are having the conversation now about starting every single game, because it's just, he's getting talked about in a way that just you don't hear. You don't hear people talking about him that way. And like in high school is one thing, people get gassed up in high school a little bit. Now he's crossed that bridge. He's in college, and they're still talking about him that way. Like, okay, like I can be as responsible as I want to be, but if everyone else around me is like running around and screaming like, you are not going to believe this, like, well, I mean, at some point you have to believe them.
You're going to be like Kevin Bacon in Animal House. There's nothing to see here, that sort of thing. Tom, there is.
Yeah.
There's a lot to see there. And what I was told is Jeremiah Smith was like the number 1 target, had the most targets on Saturday. And it's not just against second and third team, like it's against Denzel Burke. It's from any of the quarterbacks. It's one of those things where, yeah, he may start out, who knows where he starts out. But if there is one guy that you can trust, quarterbacks are going to latch onto that guy. And if that, whoever that is, if that's a freshman, it's a freshman. If it's a tight end, it's a tight end. There becomes the security aspect to it. We saw that last year with Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison, where you kind of get locked onto that guy. So that's a lot to put on a freshman. But again, like you said, because this is not like anything we've been hearing from anybody else. And I was thinking back to the J.K. Dobbins thing. We talked a lot about him, and you hear it a lot, but that was not this. And I don't have anything to compare it to that we've heard about, because I've had people ask, like, was it like this? This is unlike anything else. And it's based on, has nothing to do with high school. It's based on what they're seeing at Ohio State. And that is significant to me. You mentioned David Boston. So I went back and looked at when he finally started as a true freshman. And he started game 6, started 7 games that year, eventually overtook Buster Tillman, had 33 receptions that year, most of them obviously coming in the second half of the season. So Tom, game 6 is when David Boston broke into the starting lineup for good. If I set the over-under on where it happens for Jeremiah Smith at 5.5, where are you going?
Is over before 5.5, or is over? Under would be 5.5. Okay. I'm probably going under there. It might be the only time in this whole conversation I go under, but I'm going under there.
I'm with you. And obviously some of that has to do with the fact that you have one proven wide receiver returning in Emeka Egbuka. Carnell Tate, obviously they feel very good about him. Brian Hartline said last week, the week before, that Tate and Emeka are the only 2 receivers really running inside and outside. So they can move those guys around. He said, in fact, I don't know that we'll need any more than those 2 guys to be able to play multiple positions to get everything to work. So they can move guys around to get room for Jeremiah Smith, to get Brandon Inniss out there as well. Inniss has, from what we've all heard, done very, very well and has attacked the offseason like a guy who is ready to play. But now you look at these freshman records that we always talk about with the receivers, and how the 30 catch mark is, don't expect it. That's the standard that we've kind of put out there. Garrett Wilson, David Boston. Garrett Wilson with 30 catches in 2019. David Boston with 33 in 1996. Chris Carter has the record in all of these categories as a true freshman. 41 catches, 648 yards, 8 touchdowns. In a 16-game season, Tom, even a 15-game, heck, even in a 12 or 13, even in a 13 game season, if you ask me if to place a bet on yes or no, Jeremiah Smith breaking those records, I'm putting it on yes on all of those.
I think if you're looking at 12 to 13 games, go through the regular season, maybe go through the Big Ten championship game, I think I'm comfortable with him going over David Boston's 33 catches, 450 yards, maybe 7 touchdowns too. I think I'm there. Getting over the Chris Carter numbers, 41, 648, 8 touchdowns, just in the 13 games. I am still riding the brakes here. I am really trying to not get, because here's what will happen. If we get too far out of our skis now, by the time we get to mid-August, it's going to be like 157 catches for 3.2 miles and in just $ Texas touchdowns. Like, well, and it's okay. We got time to change our expectations a little bit between now and then, but I think I'm now at the point where we've heard enough that I am willing to say end of the regular season over the David Boston numbers. End of the full season, if they're playing 16, 17 games, over the Chris Carter numbers. And again, I reserve the right to continue adjusting expectations as conditions dictate between now and the start of the season. You're always better being a little bit cautious this time of year, but you're hearing stuff right now that you just don't normally hear. That tells us something.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's basically, it's impossible to ignore. So you take that information and you try to be responsible with it, which is not always the easiest thing to do, because the potential is incredible. But also over the course of the season, we know Ryan Day talked about the fact that there probably will be fewer plays this year because of the headsets and the lack of and the increased huddling perhaps, and defenses and offenses continuing to weaponize the clock rule. So you may lose some possessions. Now you'll get them back in the playoffs if you make it, but you're probably not going to be as prolific in the passing game this year for Ohio State, especially if the running game is as good as you think it's supposed to be. So there are only so many numbers out there. Now, I did put a poll up on the Buckeye Huddle message board asking for the range of receiving yards for Jeremiah Smith, and I went with 0. And as I see now, I see one person has voted for 0 yards. Tom, I probably guessed, but based on our conversation, that was you. Then like between 1 and 249 yards, 250 to 399, 400 to 549, basically every 150 yards or whatever. Right now, 33%, basically a third of the poll, is saying between 550 and 699 yards. Quarter of the poll saying between 700 yards and 849 yards. And then another third saying basically over 850 yards, split between 850 to 999 and 1,000 to 1199. I foolishly, or perhaps bravely, was the first person to say over 1,000 yards. That's where I am right now. I can't believe I went that far. This is a 16-game season in my mind, 62.5 yards per game. I never, I don't think 2 weeks ago, I would say, don't. It's not realistic. It's not likely. But this is a very unlikely player. Now, it's way too much. It's irresponsible. I would never say this out loud, but I went with 1,000 yards.
I feel like this is when you need to tap your microphone and say, "Is this thing on?" Because I have bad news. People can hear you right now, Tony. I don't know how to break this to you. I think there's lots of ways that 1,000 yards doesn't happen. One is he's a freshman, and we've seen guys hit the freshman wall, and that's a much longer season, and it's a much more physical season than you're used to playing. And so there's even if you start from early on, you hit the freshman wall. They're going to run the ball a lot more this year. We've talked about, the possibility of them having 2 1,000-yard running backs. You talked about the limitation of the plays. I think another factor in here is the Ohio State defense is probably going to be such that they don't need to play 4 quarters. You're not, when you play, you're not playing any 52-49 games in the regular season probably this year. Like you're going to have, the defense, if the defense is holding opponents to 7 or 10 points a game, which I think is pretty likely for a decent chunk of the schedule, you're not going to have guys playing in the late third or early fourth quarter. If it's 38-7 at the end of the third quarter, you're playing other guys. So you're losing snaps that way. You're losing snaps with the clock rolls. You're losing, receptions and pass attempts because of the running game, all of that stuff. All of that's working against you, setting aside all the freshman stuff and the expectation, the freshman expectations and all that kind of stuff. So I still do think over 1,000 yards is nuts. Over 800 yards is still like, boy, that would take a lot of stuff, all sort of, aligning at the same time. But, the Chris Carter numbers are now, I think, like, all right, I'm kind of grudgingly going, yeah, okay, that's where we're probably having the whole season over-under conversation.
Now, the idea that you're going to go for 1,000 yards, I try to remind people, Jackson Smith and Jigba had 49 yards receiving as a true freshman. That is more typical. Chris Olave, 197 yards receiving as a freshman. Marvin Harrison, 139 yards receiving as a freshman. The top 10 freshman numbers on these lists, I think there are maybe like 25 or 35 touchdowns total. I'm saying Jeremiah Smith may beat that number. Just this year, Tom. That's what I'm saying. Over 35 touchdowns this year. But no, we'll get a good look at him in the spring game on Fox, as mentioned. And so we haven't really had a chance to talk since the weekend, and I wanted to just have a conversation on that. And so now, after irresponsibly gassing somebody up, let's dial things back on another true freshman, Julian Sayin, who we had heard really good things about on Saturday. I was told, he's picking up the blitzes very well and getting the ball where it needs to be. And so when that gets posted on the message board and gets posted on the internet, the question immediately is, Tom, could he start? Tom, explain why probably not.
Yeah, probably not. And I think the answer there is there's a couple factors that go into that. And one is, this is not an Ohio State team roster-wise and expectation-wise that you need the high upside, potentially low floor of a true freshman quarterback. Like, even the very best true freshman quarterback, for years and years and years, Tony and I have said, a true freshman quarterback is going to lose you a game at some point. Like, no matter how good the true freshman is, a true freshman quarterback is going to lose you a game this year. I don't think this Ohio State team needs that elite potential upside for a true freshman quarterback. Even a quarterback of Julian Sayin's caliber and performance already, this feels like you need the steady hand of a veteran. You need you're going to have a better quarterback than like Craig Krenzel, but you need the steady veteran guy who's not going to make mistakes. You got plenty of guys on that field that are going to win you games on both sides of the ball. You don't need the quarterback to be, this is not a team that needs a Caleb Williams where, you're going to make incredible plays, or a Jaden Daniels. Like, you just need someone to get the ball out, get the ball, present a little bit of a running threat. You'll be fine. That's one piece of it. The other thing is, Tony, over under on the number of the 5 current scholarship quarterbacks who remain in the quarterback room if Julian Sayin is named the starting quarterback on, I don't know, August 8th or something like that. Over under of current Ohio State quarterbacks in that room still remaining on the team for game number 1 is 1.5. What is your bet?
Still remaining on the team, I would go over, but just barely. And that's one of the issues there. But now Chip Kelly has a very, as Will Howard said, a quarterback-friendly offense. But also, we've been told that the quarterbacks are all looking fine right now, so there's no cause for concern about this. I just thought it was interesting that they were given Sayin some reps at the ones, and I guess they did with Aaron Nolan as well. Like, you just want to see at what point what is too much, where is the water too deep for some of these guys, and it's spring. So you're not really hurting yourself in trying to find that out. We'll be able to see a bunch on Saturday. That is the Student Appreciation Day annual. What was it? 1,000 to 1,500 people, students coming into, I assume, the WAC again on the field. I guess last I heard there was supposed to be some rain, so the roof will be closed, which is, I guess you deal with it as you can. But it's always interesting to see how Ohio State handles this. They incorporate the students with some of the special team stuff, some of the kicking stuff. It's an opportunity for us to watch the entire thing. So selfishly, it's good for us. It's not always a great viewing experience because you are confined to the WAC, and sometimes you've got a bunch of people in the way and you have to sit if you're on the field watching. But it's better than not being there, and you do get to see plenty of stuff. And I know we'll all be watching the quarterbacks. We'll all be watching Jeremiah Smith and trying to get confirmation of our own eyes from everything that we're hearing. Anything you're looking for that we have or haven't mentioned?
Well, on the morning show that we dropped on Sunday night with Kevin, he talked about hearing really good things about the linebackers. So I'm going to be very interested to see, what do the linebackers look like? Who's running where? Is there an order that they're sort of sorting out in? Because as we said a couple weeks ago, we look at where things are, practice 1, practice 2 of the spring. And then when we get a chance to see, practice, what is that going to be? Practice 8 or something like that, 7, something like that. Generally, the biggest thing is, okay, what has changed? Is who's repping number 1 at center? Who's repping number 1 at right guard? Who's repping number 1 at right tackle? Has any of that changed since the last time? What order the quarterback's repping in? Are certain guys getting more snaps than others at quarterback? That kind of stuff is always really instructive, because what has changed since the beginning of the spring? Like, you can get happy talked all you want about, hey, everyone's doing great and everyone's doing wonderfully. If someone has jumped from 3rd to 1st in the line, well, that means something generally. So I'll be interested to look at all that kind of stuff. But yeah, specifically the linebackers, because it feels like on the defensive side of the ball, that's really the only area outside of, like, okay, well, who are the backup defensive tackles going to be or something like that? The defensive line, your starters are pretty much set, and then it's just kind of depth questions. Corners, same thing. Safeties, pretty much same thing. Linebackers, you lost a couple starters off last year's team. That's, I think, going to be the thing that I'm maybe most interested to see.
Yeah, and how often are CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles out there together, and who is repping first, and those kinds of things. We'll be watching all of that. We'll have something. I don't even know if what we'll be doing afterwards or leading up to it, but rest assured we'll have plenty of coverage from that as well. And again, we've got a ton of stuff on the message board right now about everything from this weekend. We didn't touch half of it today, but I did want to talk about some of it. So we've done that. Bunch more on the message board there. Join up and check that out. Tom, anything else before we go?
Yeah, right before we hit record, I counted up. Mark had 16 separate pieces of information about early spring standouts and, who's starring where and what's working, what's not, and guys who've really made a big leap. And yeah, between this show and the morning show, I think we touched on maybe 5 of them, maybe. So yes, when we always say on these shows, like, hey, you get some here, but a lot of this stuff is on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You want to take a much deeper dive, that is the place to do it. And then you can talk to us on the board and all that kind of fun stuff as well. So we hope we get to see you guys there as well.
Yeah, because we're not just putting stuff there and just leaving it. We are interacting, engaging, and answering questions as well. So thank you all for tuning in. If you have not yet hit the thumbs up on this video, please do so. And if you're just listening on the podcast, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating and review if you could. And again, check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Joining up there is a great way to support what we do here. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.